My son-in-law, the one I considered my son, quietly left the house at night with a briefcase in his hands. His strange behavior in recent days had aroused my suspicions, so, like an old prosecutor, I decided to follow him. He rushed to the river, threw the briefcase into the black water, and ran away. I dove in after it, retrieved it, but when I opened it, my heart stopped. You won't believe what was inside. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The February cold bit through my coat as I climbed the porch steps. I'd left the legal clinic at 3:30, satisfied with the work we'd done for the Martinez family. Their housing discrimination case had legs. I turned my key in the lock and stepped into the warmth of my home, the house I'd lived in for 37 years. I hung my coat on the rack and moved down the hallway, already thinking about the brief I wanted to review before dinner. That's when I saw it. The study door stood slightly ajar. I always closed it. Always. My hand went to the doorframe. The prosecutor's instinct I'd honed over 3 decades kicked in instantly. That tightening in my chest, that meant something wasn't right. I pushed the door open slowly. Papers littered my desk like fallen leaves. Drawers gaped open, their contents spilling onto the Persian rug my late wife had chosen. My father's photograph, him in his army uniform, 1943, hung crooked on the wall. But what stopped my breath was the bookshelf. Someone had moved it aside. The safe stood exposed, its door hanging open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. I didn't rush forward. Instead, I studied the scene the way I'd studied 1,000 crime scenes in my career. No broken glass, no muddy footprints. The window latches were secure. Whoever did this had walked through my front door. I approached the safe and looked inside. The velvet-lined interior was nearly empty. My father's Rolex Submariner, the one he'd bought in 1962 with his first big commission check, was gone. $18,000, the appraiser had said. The silver cigarette case that had belonged to his father, engraved with initials I'd traced as a child, had vanished, and the cash, $8,500 bills I'd set aside for quarterly taxes, was missing. I ran my fingers over the safe's dial. No scratches, no damage. Someone had opened it with the combination. Only 3 people knew that combination. Me, my daughter Evelyn, and her husband Austin. The realization settled over me like ice water. I stood there for a long moment, letting it sink in, feeling the sharp edges of betrayal, cut into places I didn't know could still hurt. Then I turned and walked toward the living room. The television was on, some cooking show with a too enthusiastic host. Austin sprawled on my couch, his feet up on my coffee table, wearing the same wrinkled shirt he'd had on that morning. Evelyn sat in the armchair, hunched forward, biting her thumbnail. Neither looked up when I appeared in the doorway. I watched them for several seconds. Austin laughed at something on the screen. Evelyn stared at her hands. Were either of you in my study today? My voice came out steady, professional, the voice I'd used in 100 courtrooms. Austin's head snapped around. What? No. Why? Someone broke into my safe. I kept my eyes on Evelyn. My father's watch is gone. The cash for my tax payment. The cigarette case. Evelyn's face went pale. She still wouldn't look at me. Austin jumped to his feet. Are you serious? Someone robbed you? When? We've been here all day. We would have heard something. Would you? I shifted my gaze to him. Evelyn? She opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands trembled in her lap. I don't know anything about it, Dad. Really? Austin's voice climbed an octave. You're asking us? You think we had something to do with this? I let the silence stretch. In my years prosecuting, I'd learned that guilty people filled silence with words. Innocent people let questions breathe. This is unbelievable, Austin threw his hands up. After everything we've done for you, living here, helping you out since Mom died, and you're accusing us of stealing? I haven't accused anyone of anything, I said quietly. I asked a question. Well, the answer is no. He paced now, agitated energy radiating off him. Maybe you misplaced them, Victor. You're not getting any younger. Memory plays tricks at your age. Did you check your other drawers? Maybe you put them somewhere else and forgot. The knife twisted deeper. I was 63, not senile. The safe was opened with the combination, not broken into. Opened. Austin stopped pacing. Something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. Well, it wasn't us. Maybe someone watched you open it. Or maybe you wrote the combination down somewhere and someone found it. I never wrote it down. Then I don't know what to tell you. His voice had taken on a desperate edge. We didn't do it. Why would we? We live here, for crying out loud. You've given us a roof over our heads. I walked to the kitchen phone, keeping them in my peripheral vision. Evelyn had started crying silently, tears running down her cheeks. Austin watched me with the intensity of a cornered animal. I dialed 911 and waited for the operator. Yes, I need to report a theft. Valuables taken from a safe in my home. No forced entry. Fine, Austin shouted. Call them. We've got nothing to hide. They'll prove we had nothing to do with this. I gave my address to the operator, answered her questions with the same professional detachment I'd once used when giving testimony. As I spoke, I watched Austin's face drain of color. He sat back down heavily. Evelyn buried her face in her hands. They're sending someone, I said, hanging up. We'll wait. The next hour crawled by in thick silence. Austin stared at the television without seeing it. Evelyn didn't move from her chair. I sat at the kitchen table, making a list of the missing items and their approximate values, noting the last time I'd seen each one. Habit from decades of building cases. Document everything. Create a timeline. Let the evidence speak. When I looked up, Evelyn was watching me from the living room, her eyes red and haunted. She looked away quickly when our gazes met. The doorbell's ring cut through the tension like a blade. Detective Mark Caldwell had tired eyes and the slow, methodical movements of someone who'd seen too much and been surprised by too little. He couldn't have been more than 50, but he carried himself like an older man, shoulders slightly hunched beneath his wool coat. I led him to my study, and he stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in the way I'd once assessed crime scenes. No forced entry, he said. It wasn't a question. None that I found. He pulled out a notepad and began photographing the room with his phone, then crouched by the safe with a small flashlight. Combination lock, no scratches on the dial, no damage to the frame. He looked up at me. Whoever did this knew the combination. Only my daughter and her husband know it besides me. Caldwell's expression didn't change. I'll need to interview them separately, you understand. Of course. He dusted the safe for fingerprints while I gave my statement at the kitchen table. I laid out the facts clinically, the items missing, their values, the timeline of when I'd left for the clinic and returned home. I mentioned the combination was known to only 3 people, but didn't push conclusions. Let him arrive at them himself. Caldwell called Austin in first. I moved to the hallway, not quite out of earshot. Austin's voice carried earnest and wounded. Detective, I can't believe this happened in our own home. Victor's been so good to us, letting us stay here after I lost my job. Who would do something like this? How long have you lived here, Mr. Carlton? Almost 2 years now, since November of 2023. And you were home all day yesterday? Yes, both of us. Evelyn was working on her laptop upstairs. I was down here, watching television, doing some job applications online. Did you hear anything unusual? See anyone around the property? Nothing, but the study is at the back of the house. If someone came through a window or something, we might not have heard. A pause. Could someone have watched Victor open the safe? Maybe through a window. The safe is behind a bookshelf, Caldwell said evenly. You'd have to move the shelf to access it. Right. I just meant, I don't know, maybe someone who used to work here. A cleaning person or a contractor who knew about it. I listened to the desperation in his voice and felt something cold settle in my chest. Evelyn's interview was briefer. She could barely speak through her tears, just shaking her head and saying she didn't know anything. She'd been in her room all day. She couldn't understand why anyone would do this. Caldwell's questions were gentle but persistent. Had she noticed anything unusual? Had anyone else been in the house recently? Did she know when her father had last accessed the safe? No, she whispered to everything. I don't know. I can't. I'm sorry. When Caldwell finished dusting for prints, he showed me the results. Only my fingerprints on the safe's dial and handle. Whoever had opened it had worn gloves or wiped it clean afterward. We stood in my study again, the room feeling violated and strange. Caldwell put away his equipment with practiced efficiency. Mr. Bennett, I'll file this report tonight and send the descriptions to local pawn shops. Keep an eye out for your items showing up online. Sometimes thieves list things on auction sites." He paused, meeting my eyes. "But I need to be honest with you. Without physical evidence or a witness, these cases are difficult. The lack of forced entry complicates things." "I understand. If anything else occurs to you, or if you notice anything unusual, call me directly." He handed me his card. "I'll follow up within a week." After he left, the house felt different, contaminated. I sat in my study for a long time, looking at the open safe, the scattered papers, my father's crooked photograph. I straightened the frame carefully, running my thumb over the glass. Over the following days, I watched. It's what prosecutors do. We observe, we collect, we build cases brick by brick. Austin began taking phone calls outside, pacing in the backyard, even when the February wind made his breath visible. He'd check over his shoulder, speak in low, urgent tones, run his hand through his hair repeatedly. When he came back inside, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Evelyn stopped eating much. I'd find plates of food barely touched in the sink. Dark circles bloomed under her eyes. Her hair went unwashed for days. When I entered a room, she'd flinch, her whole body tightening like she expected a blow. I said nothing. I waited. 9 days after the theft, I woke past midnight to raised voices downstairs. I'd been sleeping poorly, my mind turning over the evidence, building scenarios. I got up and moved quietly to the top of the stairs, staying in the darkness where the landing met the hallway. The living room below was lit by a single lamp. I couldn't see them from my angle, but Austin's voice carried clearly, a harsh whisper full of tension. "Pull yourself together. He doesn't know anything concrete. You keep acting like this. You'll give us away." "I can't do this anymore, Austin." Evelyn's voice was thick with tears. "He's my father. He looks at me and I can't—" "Stop it." A sound like a hand hitting a wall. "We're in this together, remember? You want to lose everything? You want to end up on the street with nothing? We could give it back. Say we found it. That someone must have— Don't be stupid. The items are already gone. We can't undo this. Just stay calm and keep your mouth shut." Silence, then Evelyn's muffled sobbing. "I'll take care of it," Austin said, his voice dropping lower. "Everything's going to be fine. Just don't fall apart on me now." Footsteps moved toward their bedroom. I stood completely still in the darkness, one hand gripping the banister. Below, the lamp clicked off. The house settled into silence. I stayed there a long time, listening to the quiet, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt I'd been carrying crystallized into something harder, clearer. I'd spent 32 years as a prosecutor, building cases against criminals, putting together evidence that couldn't be refuted. I knew how to investigate. I knew how to be patient. I knew how to wait for the right moment. The official system had its limitations. Caldwell had been honest about that. But I had other resources, other methods. I returned to my bedroom, but I didn't sleep. I sat by the window and watched the darkness fade to gray, watched the first light touch the bare branches of the oak tree in the backyard. My father's watch was out there somewhere, my family's history converted to cash, probably already spent. They thought I was just a grief-stricken old man, confused and helpless. They'd underestimated me. That was their first mistake. I would watch and wait. I would gather every shred of evidence, and when the moment came, I would act. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the victim. I was the prosecutor, building a case against my own family. Several nights passed. I didn't sleep much anymore. My bedroom door stayed open a crack, my ears tuned to every sound in the house. I'd lie there fully dressed, watching the clock's green numbers change, listening to the old house settle around me. It was past 2 in the morning when I heard the front door click open. I moved to the window fast but quiet, staying back from the glass where the streetlight wouldn't catch me. Austin walked down the porch steps, dressed in dark clothes, carrying a small black briefcase. He looked left, then right, then hurried toward his car parked at the curb. That briefcase, I'd never seen it before. My keys were already on the dresser. I grabbed them, pulled on my dark jacket, and went down the back stairs. Through the kitchen, out the rear door, across the yard to the garage. I had my car started and rolling onto the street 30 seconds after Austin's taillights disappeared around the corner. I stayed back, letting 2 blocks open up between us when the streets were empty, closing the gap when we hit intersections. Old instincts from working surveillance details with police detectives came back like muscle memory. Austin took surface streets, heading east, avoiding the highway. Another suspicious choice. He drove toward the Willamette River, cutting through industrial areas where nobody would be walking at this hour. I killed my headlights when he slowed down, relying on moonlight and the occasional street lamp. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady on the wheel. Austin parked near the East Bank Esplanade, where the bridge access meets the waterfront. I pulled over 300 feet back, cut the engine, watched. He got out, briefcase in hand, and stood by his car scanning the empty street. Satisfied he was alone, he started down the slope toward the river. I waited 30 seconds, then followed on foot, staying in the shadows cast by the bridge supports. The concrete was cold under my hands as I pressed against a pillar, watching Austin make his way to the water's edge. He stopped there, looked back over his shoulder twice. The briefcase swung in his hand. Then he hurled it. The arc was wide and desperate, and the splash when it hit the water sounded too loud in the quiet night. Austin didn't wait to see it sink. He turned and ran back up the slope, stumbling once, catching himself, his breath coming in visible puffs in the cold air. His car roared to life and pulled away with too much speed, tires squealing slightly on the turn. I stood there behind the pillar until his taillights vanished completely. Then I walked down to where he'd stood. The water moved slowly here, dark and cold under the bridge's shadow. The briefcase floated about 15 feet out, caught in the shallows where rocks jutted up near the bank. It hadn't drifted far. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight into the water. The cold hit like a physical blow, shocking through my pants, my legs, soaking into my shoes. The rocks were slippery under my feet. I pushed forward until the water reached my thighs, until my outstretched fingers closed around the briefcase handle. I dragged it back to shore, water streaming from the leather. My hands shook from cold, not fear, as I popped the latches. They opened easily. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of plastic bags, my father's Rolex, the second hand still sweeping smoothly around the dial. The silver cigarette case with my grandfather's initials catching the moonlight, stacks of $100 bills sealed in plastic, completely dry. All of it, everything he'd stolen. I stood there knee-deep in the freezing February water, holding the briefcase, and felt something final settle in my chest. Austin had stolen from me. When Detective Caldwell started investigating, Austin panicked and decided to destroy the evidence, throw it all away rather than risk being caught. But he'd failed, and now I held every piece of proof I needed. My son-in-law was a thief. My daughter had watched him do it, had protected him, had chosen him over me. They'd looked me in the eye and lied. They'd made jokes about my age, my memory, as if I were too senile to understand what they'd done. They'd underestimated me completely. I waded back to shore, my legs numb, water squishing in my shoes with each step. The briefcase felt heavier than it should, not from the items inside, from the weight of what they represented. Betrayal, evidence, justice waiting to be served. I carried it back to my car, set it carefully on the passenger seat. My pants dripped onto the floor mat. The heater blasted warm air that did nothing to touch the cold that had settled deep in my bones. Not the cold from the river. Something else. Something that had frozen solid the moment I'd heard Austin's footsteps running away from that thrown briefcase. I drove home slowly, methodically, following traffic laws precisely. My mind was already 10 steps ahead, planning, organizing, building the case the way I'd built 1,000 cases before. Secure the evidence, gather corroborating proof, build an airtight argument, execute with precision. Austin thought he'd disposed of the problem. He'd return home, crawl into bed beside my daughter, and sleep soundly believing he'd protected himself. He had no idea what was coming. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage. I sat in the car for a moment, briefcase on my lap, and let myself feel it. Not rage, not grief, but cold certainty. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about justice. This was about showing them exactly what happened when you stole from someone who'd spent his entire career prosecuting criminals. I got out of the car, closed the garage door quietly, and carried my father's watch back into the house where it belonged. The next morning, I drove downtown with the briefcase in a duffel bag on the passenger seat. I hadn't taken it back inside the house. That would have been foolish. Austin might go looking for it, realize it had been found. Better to secure it properly before making any moves. My bank opened at 9. I'd been a customer there for 40 years, and the manager processed my request for a safety deposit box without any questions beyond the routine paperwork. I showed my identification, filled out the forms, received a small brass key marked with the number 247. In the privacy of the vault room, I placed the briefcase inside the narrow metal box and photographed it with my phone, documentation of the chain of custody. Then I locked it away. The evidence was now protected, officially recorded, dated, everything by the book. Over the following days, I moved into the next phase. I bought a small security camera from an electronics store, the kind advertised for home monitoring. The packaging promised invisible placement and crystal clear audio. I installed it in the hallway between the living room and kitchen, positioned on top of a bookshelf where the angle captured the main traffic area. In Oregon, property owners can legally record in their own homes. I'd checked. Each night I reviewed the footage on my laptop. Most of it was mundane. Austin sprawled on the couch watching sports, Evelyn making coffee, their occasional brief exchanges about groceries or bills. I watched on double speed, taking notes with timestamps in a legal pad I kept specifically for this purpose. On the third day, I captured exactly what I needed. Austin and Evelyn stood in the hallway, speaking in low voices. Austin's tone was dismissive, confident. "Stop worrying. I took care of it. The old man never found anything. We're clear." Evelyn's voice came through tight with anxiety. "Are you sure? He's been watching us differently." "He's got nothing," Austin said. "Just relax and act normal." I replayed it 5 times, transcribed every word, marked the file as Exhibit C in the case folder I was building. I made copies, stored them in separate locations, one on my laptop, one on an external drive, one uploaded to secure cloud storage. Chain of evidence, documentation, everything admissible. But I needed more than evidence. I needed strategy. I reached out to former colleagues from my prosecutor days, calling judges I'd worked with, attorneys I'd faced in court. I didn't want just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in family law and estate planning, someone sharp enough to see the angles and pragmatic enough to use them. A retired judge gave me the name I was looking for. "Rebecca Chan," he said over the phone. "She handles difficult family situations with surgical precision. No hand-holding, no crying sessions. Pure strategy. That what you need?" "That's exactly what I need." I called her office that afternoon and scheduled a consultation for the following week. Then I spent the next several days preparing like I was presenting to a grand jury. I assembled everything into a leather portfolio, printed timeline of events, copy of Detective Caldwell's police report, bank documentation showing my safety deposit box rental, USB drive containing the video recordings with timestamps, photographs I'd taken of the briefcase contents in the vault. When I walked into Rebecca Chan's office on the 12th floor of a downtown high-rise, I carried that portfolio like I'd once carried case files into the prosecutor's office. She stood to shake my hand, younger than I'd expected, early 40s, dark hair cut professionally short, wearing a charcoal suit with minimal jewelry. Her eyes were sharp behind reading glasses. "Mr. Bennett, please sit." I sat across from her desk and methodically laid out the evidence. I didn't rush, didn't over-explain. I let each piece speak for itself. The theft, the police investigation that went nowhere, the surveillance that revealed Austin's midnight disposal attempt, the recovery of the stolen items, the recorded conversation confirming their guilt. I spoke the way I'd spoken in court for 38 years. Facts, timeline, evidence, conclusion. Rebecca spread the documents across her desk, played the video twice on her computer screen, made notes in red pen on a yellow legal pad. I watched her work and recognized something. A mind that valued precision over emotion, strategy over sentiment. After 20 minutes of silence while she reviewed everything, she looked up. "This is remarkably thorough, Mr. Bennett. You've built a prosecutor's case against your own family." "Old habits," I said. "Then you understand what I'm about to propose." She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "We have criminal options. Theft charges, possible conviction, public trial. Your evidence is solid enough. But there's another approach, more elegant, more devastating, and it keeps you in complete control." I waited. Civil recovery, estate modification, and property eviction, all perfectly legal in Oregon. She pulled out a whiteboard and began diagramming as she spoke. "First, we modify your will. Oregon law allows complete discretion in disinheritance. We leave them each $1, a token amount that proves they weren't forgotten, just deliberately excluded. That prevents any contest." She drew another line on the board. "Second, we file a civil suit for recovery of stolen property. Your evidence meets the preponderance standard easily. They'll face a court judgment, public record, everything documented. Third, we evict them from your property. No lease means 90-day notice, no cause required." Rebecca turned back to face me. "By April, they'll be facing legal action on 3 fronts simultaneously. They'll lose their inheritance, lose their home, and have a theft judgment on their permanent records. All above board, all completely lawful, all designed to make them understand exactly what they did and what it cost them." I felt something I hadn't felt since finding the empty safe. Satisfaction, not happiness. Something colder, more purposeful. "Which interests you more?" Rebecca asked. "Public punishment or private justice?" "I want them to understand they can't steal from me and hide behind family loyalty," I said. "I want consequences that last." She nodded once, crisp and businesslike. "Then we move forward. I'll draft the new will this week. We'll file the civil suit next week. The eviction notice goes out simultaneously. By the time they understand what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. How soon can we start?" "I'll have documents for your review in 3 days." Rebecca stood, extending her hand again. "Mr. Bennett, I've handled a lot of family disputes. This is the first time I've worked with a client who approaches it like building a legal case instead of an emotional crisis. It's refreshing." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "I spent 4 decades in courtrooms," I said. "I know how the law works. Now I am going to make it work for me. Then we'll make sure it works perfectly." I left her office and rode the elevator down to street level, the portfolio lighter in my hands now that I'd shared its contents. The strategy was clear. The timeline was set. The law would be my weapon, wielded with the same precision I'd once used to put criminals behind bars. Austin and Evelyn thought they'd gotten away with it. They'd stolen from me, lied to my face, tried to dispose of the evidence. They'd counted on me being too old, too trusting, too weak to fight back. By April, they'd know exactly how wrong they were. 3 days later, the documents arrived. I sat in my office with the manila folder open on my desk, reading through the draft Will Rebecca had prepared. Clean, precise, devastating. Every clause exactly as we'd discussed. No ambiguity, no loopholes. My estate, the house valued at $650,000, investments totaling $400,000, savings of $150,000, would go to the Northwest Legal Aid Foundation, a nonprofit organization I'd worked with for years. They provided free legal services to low-income families. People who couldn't afford justice would benefit from my life's work. Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett would each receive exactly $1. The language was explicit. This nominal bequest is intentional and serves to demonstrate that the testator has not forgotten these individuals, but has deliberately chosen to exclude them from any substantial inheritance. I compared the wording against my old law books, checking citations, verifying every clause against Oregon statutes. Everything was legally sound, airtight. I called Rebecca to schedule the notary appointment. She arranged it for the following week at Patricia Morris's office downtown. When I hung up, I sat for a moment with my hand still on the phone. This was the point of no return. Once I signed this document, my daughter would inherit nothing. My family line would end with me. At least in terms of legacy, I felt no hesitation, only cold certainty. The notary appointment took place on a Thursday afternoon. Rebecca met me in the lobby of a small business complex where Patricia Morris maintained her office. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence. Patricia's office was simple and professional. A desk, chairs, filing cabinets, and the tools of her trade. an official seal, a stamp press, a witness signature book. Patricia verified my identity with my driver's license and passport. She asked the required questions in a clear, formal tone. Mr. Bennett, are you making these changes to your will voluntarily, without coercion or undue influence? Completely voluntarily, I said. I'm of sound mind and clear purpose. And you understand that this will revoke all previous wills and testamentary documents? I understand perfectly. I signed where she indicated. She applied her official seal with a firm press. The sound of it, that definitive stamp, felt like closing a door that would never open again. Rebecca presented the eviction notices next. Under Oregon law, I could terminate residency with 90 days written notice when no formal lease existed. Austin and I had never signed a lease. It had been temporary, they'd said, just until Austin found work. That was 3 years ago. The notice was straightforward. Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett must vacate the premises at 2847 Laurelhurst Avenue within 90 days of receipt. I signed both copies. Back in Rebecca's office afterward, she spread a timeline across her desk. Don't serve the eviction notice yet, she advised. Let them discover the will change first. We want them off balance, reactive. When they're panicking about losing their inheritance, we hit them with the eviction. Maximum psychological impact. You think like a prosecutor, I said. She smiled slightly. I think like someone who wins. I drove home with certified copies secured in my briefcase. The original will went to my bank's document storage service that afternoon. The certified copies joined the briefcase in my safety deposit box, alongside the recovered stolen items. At home, Austin and Evelyn were in the living room. I greeted them pleasantly, asked about their day. Austin mentioned a potential job lead. I nodded encouragingly. Evelyn watched me with worried eyes, but said nothing. Over the following week, I maintained the facade, made small talk at breakfast, asked Evelyn about her freelance projects, even complimented a pasta dish Austin prepared for dinner. I could see Austin relaxing day by day, his shoulders loosening, his voice losing that tight edge it had carried for weeks. He thought I'd moved on, thought the danger had passed. One evening at dinner, Austin suggested a family vacation. Maybe this summer, he said, gesturing with his fork. Take a trip together. You've been working so hard with your volunteer work, Victor. You should relax a little. That's thoughtful, I said. We'll see how things develop. Evelyn spoke quietly. Dad, are you feeling okay? You seem different lately. I feel fine, Evelyn. Better than I have in weeks, actually. Why do you ask? I don't know. You just seem... She trailed off, unable to articulate what she sensed. I'm just enjoying my home and my life, I said warmly. Nothing wrong with that. But she kept watching me with those worried eyes. She knew something had changed. She just didn't know what. I excused myself after dinner and returned to my office. From my desk, I could hear Austin laughing at something on television. The sound carried up the stairs, carefree and confident. Let him laugh. Let him relax. Let him think he's safe. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for it to spring. Rebecca executed the next phase with surgical precision. Early April, a weekday afternoon at Common Grounds, a coffee shop downtown where freelancers worked on laptops and business people held casual meetings. She'd learned Evelyn often worked there, appreciated the atmosphere and the coffee. Rebecca scheduled a client meeting at a window table. The folder containing a copy of my will sat on the table during her consultation, visible but not obviously displayed. Just another document in a lawyer's workday. When the meeting ended, Rebecca packed her briefcase efficiently. The folder remained on the table. She walked to the counter to order another coffee, her back to the table, the document exposed. Evelyn, getting up to refill her own coffee, passed the table. Her eyes caught the header on the exposed page. Last Will and Testament of Victor Bennett. Her father's name stopped her cold. She glanced around. The woman who'd been sitting there stood at the counter ordering. Evelyn made a split-second decision. She pulled out her phone and photographed each page quickly. Cover, beneficiaries, signatures, executor designation. Her hands shook. She checked over her shoulder twice. Rebecca returned, retrieved the folder with a casual glance, and left the coffee shop. The leak was complete. Evelyn sat back down, heart pounding, and opened the photos on her phone. As she read, the color drained from her face. The house, the savings, the investments, everything to the Northwest Legal Aid Foundation. She and Austin each received $1, one single dollar. The words intentional bequest to prevent claims of omission were crystal clear. Her father had cut them out completely. That evening she waited by the front window, watching for Austin's car. When he pulled into the driveway, she met him at the door, phone in trembling hands. "Austin, you need to see this." He looked at the screen. His face flushed red, then went pale. "Where did you get this?" "A lawyer left it at a coffee shop. I saw Dad's name and "When was it signed?" he demanded, grabbing the phone. "Find the date." She scrolled to the signature page. 3 weeks ago, late March. Austin's explosion was immediate. 3 weeks and he said nothing? That, he didn't finish, just stormed toward the back of the house, toward my study. I was at my desk, reading a brief from the legal clinic. Austin burst through the door without knocking, phone thrust toward my face. "What is this? You changed your will? You're cutting us out completely?" I looked at the screen calmly. A photograph of my will. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. That appears to be a photograph of a legal document. "Where did you obtain it?" "That doesn't matter. You can't do this. After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Austin?" My voice was ice. "Lived here rent-free for 3 years, eaten my food, used my utilities, treated my home like a hotel. What am I forgetting?" I paused. "Oh yes, you stole from me." His face went white. "I never... That's insane. You have no proof." I stood, walked to my filing cabinet, and removed a thick folder. I didn't open it, just held it where he could see. "I have plenty of proof, Austin. The question is whether I choose to use it." Evelyn appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, please. We can fix this. I'm sorry for whatever you think happened." "I don't think anything, Evelyn. I know what happened, and this is the consequence." I opened my desk drawer and removed 2 envelopes, handed one to each of them. Official 90-day eviction notices, prepared on Rebecca's law firm letterhead. "You have 90 days to find other accommodations. I suggest you start looking immediately." Austin's hands shook as he opened the envelope. 90 days? You're evicting us? Your own daughter? You've been living here without a lease. Oregon law allows termination of residency with 90 days' notice. Consider yourself noticed. We'll fight this. Austin's voice climbed toward shouting. We'll challenge the will. We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions. I almost smiled. I've been evaluated by 3 independent physicians in the past month. Perfect cognitive function, excellent mental health. I had a notary verify my competence when signing the will. But please, hire an attorney. Waste your money. You're going to need it. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. How can you be so cruel? I'm your daughter. I met her eyes. And that makes your betrayal so much worse. They retreated to their bedroom, Austin still shouting threats, Evelyn sobbing. I sat back down at my desk and returned to my reading. From upstairs I could hear Austin's voice, still raised, arguing with Evelyn about what to do next. Let him shout. Rage changed nothing. The law was on my side, and I'd built my case too carefully to be defeated by empty threats from a desperate thief. The first strike had landed. They knew they were beaten, but they'd fight anyway. That was fine. Every legal challenge they filed would only drain their resources and prove their guilt further when they inevitably lost. I turned the page of my brief and continued reading. Above me, Austin's voice finally faded to silence. The certified mail arrived in early May, 3 weeks after I'd served the eviction notices. I signed for it at the door, returned to my kitchen, and opened the envelope with my coffee still steaming on the counter. A legal filing. Austin had hired an attorney. I read the petition carefully. The lawyer's name was Gerald Hicks, nobody I recognized, which suggested inexperience or bottom-tier practice. The grounds for challenging my will were predictable. I was allegedly not of sound mind due to advanced age, and susceptible to undue influence. The arguments were vague, unsupported by evidence, desperate. I called Rebecca immediately. She reviewed the filing over the phone while I read sections aloud. When I finished, she made a dismissive sound. Standard desperation move. They're claiming incompetence, which means they'll petition for a competency evaluation. We prepared for exactly this. The 3 medical evaluations, I said. Precisely. We'll file our response, including all 3 as exhibits. This won't go anywhere. The hearing was scheduled for mid-May. I drove downtown to the Multnomah County Courthouse with Rebecca, parked in the garage, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Austin was already there with Gerald Hicks, a nervous man in an ill-fitting brown suit who avoided eye contact. Evelyn was notably absent. Judge Sandra Kellerman presided. She was in her mid-50s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed both filings before calling the hearing to order. Hicks presented his case weakly. He had no medical evidence, no expert witnesses, just speculation about my age and supposedly suspicious timing of the will change. He suggested that 67 was advanced enough to question decision-making capacity. He implied that changing my will after a family dispute indicated irrationality. Rebecca demolished each point systematically. She presented 3 medical evaluations, a general practitioner, a neurologist, and a psychiatrist, all certifying my perfect cognitive function. She provided the notary's sworn statement about my clear competence during the will signing. She called 2 character witnesses, retired judges I'd worked with, who testified to my sharp mind and professional acumen. Judge Kellerman asked me questions directly. "Mr. Bennett, can you tell me why you changed your will?" I stood. "Certainly, Your Honor. I discovered that family members residing in my home had stolen valuable property belonging to me. I concluded that individuals willing to commit theft against me should not benefit from my estate. This decision was made rationally and deliberately." "And you understood the legal implications of disinheritance?" "Completely. Under Oregon Revised Statutes 112.035, a testator has complete discretion in determining beneficiaries. I exercised that discretion after careful consideration." She smiled slightly. "You seem quite familiar with estate law, Mr. Bennett." "I was a prosecutor for 38 years, Your Honor. The law is not foreign territory to me." After 20 minutes of questioning, Judge Kellerman had heard enough. "I find no evidence of diminished capacity. The medical evaluations are exemplary. Mr. Bennett clearly understands his decisions and their implications. The petition is denied." Outside the courtroom, Austin looked shaken. His last hope of retaining inheritance rights had collapsed. Rebecca approached him with a new document folder. "Mr. Carlton, you're being served." He took the folder reluctantly, opened it. His hands began to shake as he read. "Civil lawsuit for recovery of stolen property." The complaint included everything: the briefcase recovery, the recorded conversations, Detective Caldwell's police report, photographs of the recovered items. His face went from pale to ashen. Over the following weeks, Austin tried to mount a defense. He kept Gerald Hicks as his attorney for the civil case, though Hicks was clearly drowning. The discovery process revealed Austin's financial situation, nearly empty bank account, maxed credit cards, significant debts implied through credit statements. He had almost no resources for a prolonged legal fight. Then Evelyn made her crucial decision. She told Austin she wouldn't participate in defending the civil suit. I heard about it through Rebecca's investigator, but later Evelyn confirmed it herself in a brief, painful conversation. She wouldn't lie under oath, wouldn't pretend she didn't know what had happened. Austin erupted at her. "You're abandoning me? After I did this for us?" Her response was quiet but devastating. "You did this for yourself, Austin. I just went along with it because I was weak. I'm done." Their marriage fractured completely after that. They lived in the same house but in separate worlds, barely speaking. Rebecca called me regularly with updates. Each one showed Austin's position weakening. His attorney was ineffective. His finances were depleted. His marriage was collapsing. And the eviction deadline was approaching. Early June, just days away. Late one evening, I sat in my study reviewing the case documents. I thought about Austin's desperate petition, his weak attorney, his crumbling marriage. He'd thought he could steal and hide behind family bonds. He'd thought I was too old, too trusting, too weak to fight back properly. Every assumption had been wrong. I wasn't fighting back. I was systematically dismantling his life, using the very legal system I'd served for decades. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. There was a difference, and Austin was learning it the hard way. The eviction date arrived in 10 days, then the civil trial. each piece falling into place exactly as planned. Early June arrived with morning sunlight and the knock I'd been expecting. I opened the front door to find Deputy James Warren, clipboard in hand, with Rebecca standing beside him on the porch. "Mr. Bennett?" The deputy was young, professional, his uniform crisp. "I'm Deputy Warren, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. I'm here to enforce Eviction Order 2025 CV-007. Please come in, Deputy." I stepped aside. "The residents are upstairs." He explained the procedure formally, though I knew it already. Austin Carlton and Evelyn Bennett had until 5 o'clock this evening to vacate. Any belongings not removed by then would be placed in storage at their expense. They would be legally barred from re-entering the property. I could hear movement upstairs, drawers opening, footsteps, muffled voices. They'd known this day was coming, but clearly hadn't finished packing. Evelyn came downstairs first. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She didn't look at me. She spoke only to the deputy. "How much time do we have?" "Until 5 o'clock this evening, ma'am." A rented moving truck arrived around 9. Austin and Evelyn began carrying boxes down, clothes, books, small furniture pieces. I remained in my study with the door open, watching occasionally but not interfering. I wasn't gloating, just ensuring compliance. Austin passed my doorway multiple times, shooting angry glares, but saying nothing. He knew any confrontation would only make things worse. His face was tight with suppressed rage, but he kept it contained. Around 3 in the afternoon, Evelyn appeared at my study door. She stood there silently until I looked up from my papers. She tried to speak, tears streaming down her cheeks, but couldn't find the words at first. Finally, "Dad, I need to say, I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. "Sorry doesn't return what was stolen, Evelyn. It doesn't undo betrayal. You made your choices. These are the consequences." "I know. I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means your betrayal hurt more than it would have from a stranger. That's what it means." She nodded, turned away, left. By 4:30, the truck was loaded. Austin performed a final walkthrough with Deputy Warren accompanying him. Everything appeared in order. They stood on the front porch, keys in hand. The deputy extended his palm. Austin held the keys in his closed fist for a moment, then opened his hand. The keys fell rather than being placed. Deputy Warren pocketed them, handed them to me. Austin walked to the truck without looking back. Evelyn followed, her shoulders slumped. I watched from the window as the moving truck pulled away. They'd rented a cheap apartment on Portland's outskirts. Rebecca's investigator had confirmed it. A rough neighborhood, a small space, a drastic downgrade. I felt no guilt. Consequences are rarely comfortable. After they left, I walked through the empty rooms. Surprisingly clean. Evelyn's influence, probably. I called a locksmith. Within 2 hours, all exterior locks were changed. The next day, a security company installed a new alarm system. My house was mine again, and it would stay that way. That evening, I sat alone in my living room for the first time in 3 years. The silence was profound. No footsteps overhead, no muffled television, no tension, just quiet. I poured myself a whiskey. Not celebrating exactly, just acknowledging that something wrong had been corrected. 2 weeks later, the civil trial began. Judge Kellerman presided again. She remembered Austin's failed will challenge, which worked in our favor. Rebecca's presentation was methodical and devastating. She displayed photographs of the recovered items on a projector screen. She played the audio recording of Austin and Evelyn's conversation where Austin said, "I took care of it." She presented Detective Caldwell's testimony about the original theft report. She called me to the witness stand. I testified about the night of the river recovery. I heard the front door open around 2 in the morning. I looked out my window and saw Austin Carlton leaving with a briefcase. I followed him to the Willamette River. I watched him throw the briefcase into the water. After he left, I retrieved it. Inside was my property, my father's watch, the cigarette case, and my cash. Everything that had been reported stolen. Gerald Hicks attempted cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Mr. Bennett, that you were trespassing when you followed my client?" "No. I followed him on public streets and recovered property from a public waterway. No trespass occurred, but you were spying on him, invading his privacy. I was observing someone I suspected had stolen from me. That's not illegal. He gave up after 15 minutes. My prosecutor experience showed, I answered precisely, didn't get rattled, never volunteered more than asked. Judge Kellerman called a brief recess to review the evidence, then returned with her verdict. I find the defendant, Austin Carlton, liable for theft by conversion. The evidence is overwhelming and the defendant's defense is unpersuasive. Judgment for plaintiff in the amount of $29,500 for return of stolen property, plus $12,000 in attorney fees. Total judgment, $41,500 payable within 90 days. Outside the courthouse, I stood with Rebecca on the steps. She was satisfied. Complete victory on all fronts. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked. "I feel that justice was served," I said. "That's enough." Austin had no money, no inheritance prospects, a collapsed marriage, and now a $41,000 judgment against him. His life was systematically dismantled. But there was one more thing. Rebecca mentioned it as we parted ways. "The criminal charges," she said. "Detective Caldwell can reopen the case now that we have the civil verdict, if you want to pursue it." I considered. Criminal prosecution would mean jail time for Austin, a felony record, complete destruction of any remaining prospects. "Let me think about it," I said, but I already knew my answer. Rebecca called 1 week after the civil trial verdict. Her voice carried quiet anticipation. "The civil judgment is entered. Now we can pursue criminal charges. The DA will take this case. You have documented evidence of felony theft. Are you ready to proceed?" "I'm ready," I said. "What's the process?" "Take your evidence to Detective Caldwell. He'll write a supplemental report and forward everything to the district attorney. With the civil finding, this becomes a very strong criminal case." "What about Evelyn?" "She didn't physically commit the theft or dispose of evidence. Knowledge of a crime isn't the same as participating in it. Austin will face charges alone." I spent the next day organizing my evidence package. Everything went into a 3-ring binder with tabbed sections: investigation, recovery, civil proceedings, evidence. I included copies of the civil judgment, the original police report, photographs of the recovered briefcase and contents, transcripts of the recorded conversation, my written statement about the river surveillance, a prosecutor building a case, which was exactly what I was. 2 days later, I sat across from Detective Caldwell at his desk in the central precinct. The bullpen was busy around us, phones ringing, detectives typing reports, the low hum of official business. I walked him through each piece of evidence methodically. He took notes, asked clarifying questions, nodded with understanding. "This is remarkably complete, Mr. Bennett," he said. "You've done my job for me. I was a prosecutor for 38 years. I know what you need." He leaned back in his chair. "The property value is over $1,000. So this is theft in the first degree, Class C felony. 5-year maximum sentence. I'll recommend prosecution." "How long before charges are filed?" "DA review, grand jury indictment. Probably 3 weeks. I'll keep you updated." The 3 weeks passed quietly. I maintained my routine: volunteer work at the legal clinic, morning coffee on my reclaimed porch, evenings reading in my study. I didn't obsess over the case. I trusted the system to function as designed. Caldwell called in late July. Grand jury returned an indictment. Arrest warrant issued this morning. We picked him up an hour ago. He posted bail and was released. "Thank you for the update, Detective." Austin's situation deteriorated rapidly. His employer placed him on unpaid leave pending resolution of criminal charges. Without income, his cheap apartment became barely affordable. Gerald Hicks agreed to represent him, but warned that criminal charges were different from civil. The burden of proof was higher, but Austin's civil liability already established his guilt. The preliminary hearing occurred in early August. I attended, sitting in the gallery with Rebecca. The prosecutor, a sharp young attorney named David Chen, presented the evidence to the judge. Austin's defense was non-existent. Hicks could only argue procedural points that went nowhere. The judge found probable cause and scheduled trial for late September. But after the hearing, Hicks pulled Austin aside. I didn't hear the conversation, but Rebecca's investigator reported it later. Hicks told Austin the brutal truth. he was going to lose at trial. The evidence was overwhelming. The best option, the only realistic option, was a plea agreement. Austin, broken and desperate, agreed. Hicks negotiated with Prosecutor Chen. Austin would plead guilty to theft in the first degree in exchange for probation instead of prison. The deal included 18 months supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, restitution, and a permanent felony conviction. The plea hearing occurred in mid-August. I attended. Austin stood before Judge Kellerman, the same judge from the civil case, and formally pleaded guilty. He admitted under oath to stealing my property and attempting to dispose of evidence. "Mr. Carlton," Judge Kellerman said, "you're pleading guilty to theft in the first degree. Do you understand this is a felony conviction that will remain on your record permanently?" "Yes, Your Honor." His voice was barely audible. "And do you admit that on or about February 10th, 2025, you did unlawfully take property belonging to Victor Bennett with intent to permanently deprive him of that property?" "Yes, Your Honor." "The court accepts your guilty plea. I hereby sentence you to 18 months supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution as determined by the civil judgment. You are also advised that this felony conviction carries consequences, including loss of certain civil rights and difficulties in employment. Do you understand?" "I understand." Outside the courthouse after the plea, I saw Austin one final time. He was with Hicks, signing paperwork on a concrete bench. He looked 20 years older than he had 6 months ago, haggard, defeated, hollowed out. His cheap suit hung loosely on a frame that had lost weight. Our eyes met briefly across the plaza. His expression was empty. No anger, no defiance, just exhaustion and defeat. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just completion. Justice had been served through the proper channels. The law I'd spent my career serving had functioned exactly as designed. Austin was a convicted felon now. That was enough. I turned and walked down the courthouse steps, briefcase in hand, afternoon sun warm on my shoulders. It was finished. Late August arrived with morning light filtering through the oak trees in my front yard. I sat on the porch with coffee and the newspaper. Actual paper, the way I preferred it. The neighborhood was quiet. A woman walked her dog past my house. She waved. I waved back. Small pleasures, simple routines. My house, my time, my peace. The spare bedrooms had been repainted. Neutral colors, clean walls, no trace of former occupants. I'd walked through them after the painters finished, running my hand along fresh paint, opening empty closets. The rooms were mine again. The whole house was mine. It felt lighter somehow, like a weight lifted. One morning, a letter arrived forwarded by Rebecca's office, handwritten. I recognized Evelyn's handwriting immediately. I sat at my kitchen table and read it. The letter was long, several pages of careful script. An apology, detailed and thorough. She explained that she and Austin had divorced, that she was living alone in a small apartment, working multiple freelance jobs to survive. She took responsibility for her silence during the theft, admitted she should have stopped Austin or told me immediately. "You're my father," she wrote near the end. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Not for money or inheritance, just for the possibility of being your daughter again someday." I read the letter 3 times. She was my daughter. I'd raised her, loved her, supported her for 37 years, but she'd betrayed me, stood silent while her husband stole from me, chose his criminal behavior over honesty with me. The pain of that betrayal hadn't faded. I sat with the letter for several days, considering whether to respond. Ultimately, I didn't. Not out of cruelty, but because I'd said everything that needed saying. She'd made choices. Consequences followed. Perhaps years from now there might be room for limited contact, but not now, not yet. I filed the letter away in a desk drawer. Not thrown away, but not answered. Some doors remain closed until time decides otherwise. In early September, I met Rebecca one final time to close out all legal matters. She confirmed everything. The civil judgment remained enforceable for 10 years. Austin's probation would last 18 months. His criminal record was permanent. My will was updated and secured. Everything documented, official, complete. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. I feel that justice was served. I don't feel happy about it. This wasn't about happiness. My daughter betrayed me, my son-in-law stole from me, but they faced consequences, and the law worked as it should. That's enough. She nodded, understanding. Most people in your position would want revenge, emotional satisfaction from seeing them suffer. I'm not most people. I wanted what the law promises, consequences for wrongdoing. I got that. The suffering that resulted was their choice, not my objective. We shook hands professionally. The business relationship concluded appropriately. That afternoon, I drove to my bank. I accessed my safety deposit box and removed my father's Rolex watch. It had been cleaned, serviced by a watchmaker, restored to perfect condition. I sat in the bank's private viewing room, holding it in both hands. The watch represented more than monetary value. It represented family legacy, generational connection, trust. My father gave it to me when I passed the bar exam 40 years ago. He said it represented time. That time would test my principles, and the watch would remind me to hold steady. Austin tried to steal that, not just the object, but what it meant. He failed. I fastened the watch onto my wrist. It fit perfectly. The weight was familiar and comforting. I drove home, parked in my garage, entered my house. I walked through each room slowly, living room, kitchen, study, upstairs bedrooms, taking inventory of my reclaimed space. Everything as it should be. My house, my possessions, my peace. 67 years to learn this lesson. Protect what's yours, not with walls or weapons, but with boundaries and consequences. The story ends on a quiet morning in early September. I'm sitting on my porch with coffee, my father's watch on my wrist, newspaper beside me. I'm not thinking about revenge or justice anymore. Those chapters are closed. I'm thinking about the volunteer work at the legal clinic this afternoon, the dinner I'll cook tonight, the book I'm reading. Simple things. Free things. I look at the watch, check the time. The second hand sweeps smoothly around the face, precise, reliable, enduring, like justice itself. I smile slightly, take a sip of coffee, and begin my day. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.